Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Track B. I hope you're in the right place and that you've had a good morning in terms of kicking off our GIS day. Just a quick few housekeeping reminders. That we will, for folks who are from the assessor's office, to please make sure that you join by including your full name and your county email so that you can get your BOE credit. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and so I can see everyone. Our first speaker is going to be Dana Reed. He's going to be presenting on the role of GIS in disaster recovery and damage assessment. Dana Reed is the director of Santa Clara County Office of Emergency Management. He currently is responsible for Santa Clara County Office of Emergency Management and the Santa Clara County Emergency Operating Center, serving the county and the operational areas within 15 jurisdictions. Dana has been in public service for 40 years. Amazing. He has served on the Bay Area Earthquake Plan Leadership Committee and was instrumental in planning for Super Bowl 50. And I'm hoping we will have another Super Bowl coming soon, Dana. And he's collaborating with planning and communication process with the operational area of San Francisco County and San Mateo County and the host cities. Dana is a California certified chief officer, California Emergency Management specialist, and hold a Bachelor of Science degree in occupational study. That's a mouthful, Dana. And we're just delighted to have him here. And so I'm going to pass the baton over to Dana to share his presentation.
All right, thank you, Boo. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to GIS Day. I just got to give a quick thank you to Nina and her entire team, Sampa, Yoko, Boo, and many others who really put this together today and have provided a really great program in 2 different tracks. And the fact that it's being recorded will give an opportunity for everyone to take a look at all the areas of interest they might have. So this is great today. I really enjoyed Nina's opening comments and really enjoyed Todd's keynote speaking as well. So I also am very fortunate today that I have with me, joining me, is Dr. Paristu Najaf. Paristu works in our office. She's a senior planning coordinator, and she has primary responsibility right now for recovery and mitigation. And she's been a very, very important part with damage assessment and was instrumental, especially with overseeing our recovery operations during the most recent winter storm series spanning January, February, and March. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If that's all right with everyone, I'll do that. All right, everybody should be able to see my screen, I hope. Thank you. That worked. That's always a plus when your technology worked. Just got the thumbs up, so thank you for that. So we're going to talk about disaster recovery and damage assessment today. And what I want to do is talk about some of the aspects of that, and I'll get to that slide in a moment, but I want to give you a little bit of background. So here in Santa Clara County, we've had some pretty significant events. For example, the 2017 floods that we had here in the county. We had the 4th largest wildfire in California during 2020 called the SCU complex. GIS was a big part of that incident as well. And then most recently, we had the series of storms starting basically the day after Christmas, actually, and spanning into January, into February, with probably the largest snowfall we can ever recall here in the valley, especially up in the upper elevations, not so much here on the valley floor. And then again, another major atmospheric river event in March. So we were activated for the storm series for 96 days. And one of the big components of that, along with the response, certainly is the beginnings of doing damage assessment. Each one of those events was separate. Each one had a proclamation of emergency. And 2 out of the 3, the January event, we received a presidential declaration for the county. That was Declaration 4683. And we also received a declaration for the March series of storms, Declaration 4699. Did not receive one for the February snowstorm, if you will. So there's a tremendous amount of work that has to go into disaster recovery, and more specifically, the damage assessment aspect. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background on that. We do have 15 cities and towns in our jurisdiction. And of course, we are responsible for the unincorporated area as a whole. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with, this is the overview, some of the things we'll talk about today, damage assessment overview, technology options, challenges with recovery and damage assessment, and best practices. And then, of course, we want to make sure we leave some time for questions as well. So I gave you a little bit of an overview, but I'll give you a little bit deeper dive on damage assessment. So there's something called the initial damage estimate, and this is the beginning of the process. It usually comes, very quickly early on in the incident. We'll start to try to gather that information, and we funnel that information to the California Office of Emergency Services, Cal OES. I'll refer to it that way from here on out. And then that can then be pushed to FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, for consideration and additional aid to the community. So you start out with the IDE process. You have to gather that information and then report it. There's the form down below on the right-hand side of this slide. You'll see that's the form we actually used to move the information forward to the state of California. So some of the challenges with this is you're trying to meet thresholds. So you'll see in the slide, we talk about our thresholds back in 2023. It's based on a $4.44 per capita figure that totals $8.6 million. And then in 2024, it went up slightly, or will go up slightly to 460. What that really means is if we want to try to receive aid, we've got to meet that threshold as a county. And so that's why IDE is so important, to start to get that information to determine what the damages might be. Typically, the first IDE is all about government infrastructure, roads, buildings, power plants, sanitation, firehouses, police stations, those types of things. You're trying to determine how much damage there are that has occurred through the event at those types of facilities. And that's kind of the beginning of the IDE process. And then it will transcend into the public assistance process, which is where we're hoping to get additional assistance through grants and through the government as well, nonprofit organizations for debris removal, emergency protective measures and repair, and so on. So it's kind of 2 processes that we follow. But the initial part is really about identifying damage, making a rough estimate, which will later have to be verified. We'll talk about that a bit, and then seeking that assistance. I'm going to move on to the next slide for you. So one of the challenges we have is, well, how do you do the IDE? How do you even start to gather that information? The EOC is activated. We have a recovery team in place. How do you start to gather that information? And there's many ways you can do that. But what we've come to learn over time is the use of technology. And, we're also really fortunate because we have a GIS team typically will embed with us in the EOC when we're activated. Yoko, Sampa, and Boo have all worked here in the EOC, plus many of the other staff. We start to use that GIS mapping. Todd talked about all the different layers and all the different options you can utilize in GIS. And so we utilize whatever layers and whatever technology we need to start capturing what is needed for tracking all the damage. In the slide, you see the small cutout, if you will, of a GIS map, and you might even be seeing some of the mapping behind me today. And then, of course, the Survey 123 tool. And these are all GIS-based products that we decided to use during the storm process. And I think what's important to note about that is you really have to have an entire team to do that. So we were able to do that in real time with the assistance of the GIS team and working within the EOC and recovery coordinators, the recovery team, I will say, which was led primarily by Parastu, to put that together in real time, create that opportunity. And we took that a step further by pushing that out to the community, because the majority of the damage during the storm series was not so much here on the valley floor as much as it was up in the upper elevations, with some damage on the valley floor, but a tremendous amount of damage in what we call the Santa Cruz Mountain Range area that is between our county and Santa Cruz County, up on what they call the Highway 17 corridor. So that was vital for us to come up with something that we could push out to the community for them to assist with us to help us find out what the initial damage estimate might be in those areas. So that is the tool we use, Survey 123. In fact, I think they show a snippet of it during the video before we started track B today as well. And that is the tool that we used. And I think, without that, quite frankly, it would have been very challenging for us to drive all of these roads. A lot of them are dirt. A lot of them are quite remote. And then, of course, especially after February, I literally had damage assessment teams were driving in the snow. Actually, one day when they went out, it was actually snowing while they're trying to drive and look at all the damage assessment areas. So this tool really ended up being hugely valuable, and we're going to continue to use it and refine it as we go forward. So the results of that, when we did the January storm, through all the efforts of everyone, we got back about 150 plus survey submissions, which was very helpful. When we went back out for the March storms, we got over 340. Now, the March storms brought down a lot of trees, a lot of debris, and also added to the damage, quite frankly, that was created in January and during the snowstorm. So by March, there was quite a bit of reporting that took place through the Survey 123 results. What was great about that is that we made it so that we set it up so folks could actually send us photographs. So that's an example of two of those photographs you're seeing in the slide today. And that really helped us visually start to determine if we had destroyed homes, major damage, affected, impacted, and so on in those categories. And this really, really made the difference for us. And it also helped with when the Cal OES assessment teams came in and the FEMA assessment teams came in. This was really an important data for them to utilize and really important data for them to review, and helped us paint the picture of the level of damage as a result of the storms. A January storm being separate, and then the March storm also being a separate event. And they don't aggregate those. In other words, they will not combine those. Each time you have an incident, you have to meet the threshold that I showed you earlier in the slide at 8.6 million. I think it was 8.6. And so you have to come up with that every time. The majority of our damage was to our residents, their homes, And we had a tremendous amount of debris cleanup to do, trees down, power lines down, and also had a tremendous amount of damage on our road system. So all of this Survey 123 helped build that picture, and then you plot it on a GIS map, and you might see that map up behind me. That's the actual map we use. It makes a huge difference when you're starting to organize your team's deployment and capturing where the damage actually is. So that the results of that really drove us to where we need to be. I'll tell you another part of the story here is that we really felt during the January storms in particular, we really felt that the residents qualified for what they call individual assistance household assistance. And you have to meet, that's a different threshold. You have to meet that based on the number of destroyed and major damaged homes. And we were very close on that threshold. And by using the GIS map, the 123 results, and some reevaluation on that, we submitted for that aid, and we were denied. So we're a bit tenacious here at OEM. So we didn't give up because we felt that we did have the criteria for us to receive the IA. And so we worked on it some more, and we went back out. We looked at all our data from Survey 123. We went out and brought the teams back, did additional assessments out in the field, and we appealed the decision through Cal OES to FEMA. It took some time, admittedly, but we actually did win the appeal, and that allowed us to provide assistance to the January storm residents. And that was huge for them because that gave them the opportunity to get some assistance from the federal government. And we set up resource centers for that. Paris2 ran that entire operation as well, and actually ended up being quite successful for those residents. We did not meet the thresholds in March, unfortunately, but we did meet the thresholds in January. So that was very helpful to the community, because really at the end of the day, for emergency management, the Emergency Operations Center, it's really all about getting the resources and getting what you need for the community. So I've moved now to the challenges. So some of the challenges are, we were talking about this the other day. In fact, Paris2 and I were talking about this, that if you have an incident where an entire neighborhood is tragically destroyed during a wildfire, those areas lend themselves very well to what you might call a windshield survey. You can actually drive those neighborhoods, and you can actually very quickly see what the magnitude of the damage is. So windshield surveys are good. It's low tech, but even during a windshield survey, the responders and the roads and airports, whoever's doing the windshield, they can still use that Survey 123 tool to capture the information. And that again gives us visuals and also gets it pinpointed on a map. And then that'll give you an immediate, kind of helps identify your immediate needs. But then there's the elements of, safety and security, getting into those areas and making sure it's safe to do so. In our particular case with the storm series, windshield surveys were going to be very difficult to do because of the location of the damage, long driveways, private property areas, dirt roads, and so on. So that's why we chose to do the 123 out to the public, to the actual residents, to help us find the damage associated with those storms. I really feel that was way more effective to utilize for that series of storms. And I think it really, really made the difference. When we had the SCU complex fire, we actually, interestingly, we didn't do the damage assessment for that. CAL FIRE did it because they had an entire incident command team. They did all the damage assessment property by property, and then provided all that data to us with a GIS map layer. And that worked really well for us because it gave us a clear picture of categories and what the needs were. So in that case, an outside agency, a government agency, actually did all the damage assessment. I think the other challenge that we ran across was managing public expectations and the programmatic criteria. Sometimes websites, and Todd kind of touched on this too, the website will lead you to believe, that it's either easy, or the website will give you information that will seem like, well, what's the problem here? It sounds like I can get assistance. Why can't I get assistance? And so one of the challenges we always have with recovery and damage assessment is being able to manage those expectations. And we do a tremendous amount of communications, both either in press releases or in social media, to make sure that we're doing the very best job that we can do for our residents that we serve, to give them the right information, because it's really frustrating. Just imagine you've got your own home and a tree comes through the roof, and for you, that's devastating. You may or may not have insurance. Your insurance may or may not cover it. You may have high deductibles, so on. And it's really frustrating because that's your home, and it continues to rain and the weather is coming into your home and doing additional damage. And so our job is to really try to work with those residents and try to mitigate wherever we possibly can mitigate, but also make sure that they know what is really available and what they might be eligible for. And there's a lot of moving parts in that. And then our role versus Cal OES and FEMA, so everybody has a role. We get the initial information. Cal OES then takes that information and determines if we're eligible or not, and then they are the actual conduit to FEMA to try to get additional assistance. Typically, it's the governor. Quite honestly, it's the governor will make a request to the President of the United States for a declaration. And it all takes a bit of time sometimes, and other times it's extremely obvious and very quick. So take Santa Cruz, for example. During the storms, it was abundantly clear right away with all the damage in, for example, in Capitola, that a declaration was in order. So the declaration came very quickly for Santa Cruz County, but we had to do more documentation, more assessments to ultimately get our declaration. So keep in mind that you really do have to have a strong media program, communications program, and be in the community out there when those folks need help with damage assessment and recovery. And the backbone of that, again, is GIS and the Survey 123. The teams that came in, we had a local assistance center up in the Redwood Estates area, and when the teams came in, one of the comments that they shared with us, which made us feel really good, by the way, was that we're one of the few counties that actually embedded county staff in that process, and we were there every single day along the state and along the federal side of things, to be there to answer questions to the community, to support them, and to talk with them. So we had a very robust recovery program. So lessons learned and best practices. Well, hindsight's really a great thing, and all of us can tell stories, and all of us can relate to that very much so on many things throughout life. But what we did learn is that we were successful with using the tool, and we'll absolutely be using that tool again. And certainly we will continue to refine that tool and add to it as much as possible. The best practices we came out of from is that you need to really over communicate with the community. You need to really communicate internally to the governmental agencies. You need to really include all your partners, whoever those are, roads and airports, GSA, public works, whatever you have in your entities and all the other departments. You've got to stay very tightly connected with them, and they've got to have them at the table with you while you're going through this process. because they all have a piece of responsibility during recovery and certainly for damage assessment. So those were two primary things. And then also a few other things we came up with that are important was that you need to make sure you're doing your disclosures. So if you have to tell the public where their information is going to go. You're participating in this program, and your information is going to be used and given to other governmental agencies to aid in damage assessment, aid, and so on. So you have to make sure you need to make sure that you cover that. So the privacy statement, which is on the slide that you should now have, is really, really important. And again, I can't stress the importance of the social media and press releases. I think that was probably one of our strongest best practices that came out of this. All right, let's see. I think the other item is we needed to, for the unincorporated county considerations, we needed to make sure that we understood the location of the damage based on address. So that kind of goes back to what Todd touched on, is you have to know where your parcels are. And that's the beauty of GIS, is that you can look all of that up, and then you can tie that back to your planning and development departments. Because we had a few instances where we were trying to figure out, well, is this damaged property in a sphere of influence for a municipality, or is this damage specifically in an unincorporated part of the county? So that's the real power of GIS, quite frankly, is, and when you get comfortable using it and understanding how you can leverage it, that's the real power of GIS. It helps you sort all that out. You can build those layers, and you can therefore create better documentation, better reports, and a better understanding of what you're trying to accomplish for damage assessment. So I want to leave a bit of time for questions if there are any. I mean, you're more than welcome to email us and get more information. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to our host for questions. Paristu is with me here today. She's been instrumental in our recovery and mitigation program. So if there's any questions, I may turn to her to answer those questions. But I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And I can't say enough about GIS and the use of the Survey 123. It really made the difference during the storm series. So thank you for that. All right, back to you.
Thank you so much, Dana. Really appreciate it. I'm not seeing any questions in chat. If anybody have any questions, feel free to post them in chat. We'll make sure to share them with Dana afterwards. And he's so generous in giving his contact too, so you can also reach out to him directly. With that, I think what we'll do is take a break, and if you can.
Boo, somebody actually raised hand.
Oh, I didn't see that. So feel free to unmute yourself and please ask the question.
I think, yeah.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Charlie from VTA. It's a great presentation, Dana. And thank you so much for sharing the information. I think my question is more, I was wondering if the Office of Emergency Management has a like a EOC dashboard that supporting all your emergency actions, because right now VTA we have a new like emergency preparedness manager, and she is definitely interested in have our own kind of a emergency dashboard. Yeah, so that's my question. So we just want to learn from others. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for enjoying the presentation. We don't have a specific dashboard. Actually, we use a series of different situational awareness tools to help us track everything. We do have a platform called web EOC that we can collect data in, but we also have some other tools that we use to collect data. So we don't really have, I guess, what I would call the traditional dashboard. I think the best example of the dashboards, quite frankly, that were developed during COVID by public health, those types of dashboards. But we're not opposed to that. And, that's the continuing. We're actually out looking right now for a different situational awareness, common operating platform to utilize to further refine our situational awareness, which for us, quite frankly, directly ties into recovery and damage assessment. It's really all about us finding out what's going on and tracking that situational awareness, because that's what drives our objectives in the EOC, and that's what drives the decisions made by the management team, both for response, recovery, and mitigation. So I don't have a specific dashboard, but happy to chat with you offline about that. So thank you.
Great. Dana, we have one more question from Chad.
Sure.
So Chad, feel free to lean in.
I raised my hand by accident, but I do have a question. How do people get the 123 form? And how do they know about it?
You know what? I'm gonna. That's an awesome question, by the way. I'm gonna let Peristu answer that, because really, she was the architect along with our GIS team. So I think she'll do a much better job of giving you some great insight to that. So I'm going to turn it over to Peristu.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. So depending on the incident and when we activate the survey 123, we actually push it out through multiple platforms. So here at the EOC, utilizing our public information officer and the entire public information team, we push it through what's called a joint information system. A lot of PIOs, public information officers throughout the county and the Bay Area. We push it out through social media. We post it to our website. We send it out to all of our nonprofit partners, who then push it to their networks. So we also share the link to the survey 123 with the board offices, and each board of supervisor members then pushed it out to their network. So we try to push it as far and as wide as possible. But if there are any other suggestions, and if you think there's a gap, you're definitely open to recommendations. The last series of storms that we had was the first time that we used the tool. We in fact learned a lot from the first time we deployed the tool in January and implemented some of those lessons when we used it again in March. But it's a new endeavor for us, and we are looking to improve our practices. So if you have any recommendations, I would love to hear it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Dana, thank you so much for your presentation and joining us as part of the GIS Day. We now will take a break, and please be back at 10:45. Thanks, everybody.